This is not about Russia. That illusion is finished. Arestovych tears the mask off the West's peacekeeper myth. Western troops are being prepared to police Ukraine, not confront Moscow. 10,000 soldiers don't stop Russia. They control a collapsing state. The message is brutal. The West fears Kyiv more than it fears the Kremlin.
I will explain to you why troops are being introduced onto the territory of Ukraine. This is not planned to be conducted against Russia. This is for the prevention of a civil war in Ukraine. This is their only real task. These are stabilisation forces which, for example, were introduced in Bosnia, perfectly understanding, the West perfectly understands, let us say, all the prospects of post-war states in which there are 1.5 million units of irregular automatic weapons, 1 million veterans, and simply screaming absence of law and screaming political and social contradictions, and very few resources. Therefore, they need stabilisation forces. They will simply not be called that. They will say that this is all against Russia, treacherous, in order to attack. Well, and Russia, earlier than anyone else, will know that this is for the prevention of a civil war in Ukraine. This is stabilisation for the stabilisation of Ukraine, and not against Russia. Therefore, it will safely agree if a responsible agreement is reached. And it seems they are quite close.
The real enemy, according to the West's own insiders, is Ukraine's internal chaos. Illegal weapons everywhere, 1 million embittered veterans, power clans circling Kyiv, elections nobody trusts. NATO knows Zelensky cannot hold the country together, so Europe prepares occupation light, Bosnia style, with patrols, checkpoints, and ballot box babysitting.
Well, some reasonable time frames. Not directly tomorrow, but, well, even the time frames were named. Zelensky said that the law, where someone there from the deputies, Stefanishin, in my opinion, there, or whatever his name is, he said that by the end of February, a new electoral legislation will be ready, plus some time there back and forth. And so we are ready. Well, consider, according to the plan of all these negotiating groups, somewhere by the end of February, the first agreements should be reached, for example, the possibility of holding elections in Ukraine. If there were screaming contradictions by that time, as they tell us about the armed forces, about Donbass there, before Donbass, and so on, then no time frames would be named and fulfilled. These are interdependent things.
This is a vote of no confidence in Zelensky. Washington and Brussels don't trust him to keep deals, control his army, or stop provocations. So they plan to monitor Ukrainian violations, not Russian ones. Estonia screams about Russian threats. But reality exposes Tallinn as a loud pawn, useful for noise, irrelevant for decisions.
That is, for example, the readiness of Ukraine for elections is exchanged for the presence, for example, of troops as stabilisation forces for holding all those same elections in reality, and the absence of vivid civil clashes, because the prospects of street businesses in Odessa, Kyiv, Vinnytsia, Zhytomyr, Lviv, Kharkiv, well, Kharkiv will not happen, but the right bank, for example, with the presence there of 10,000 foreign troops, are significantly less than with their absence. Therefore, this is, among other things, a contingent that will ensure the holding of elections.
Russia understands the game. These troops are not a threat to Moscow, they are a leash on Kyiv. That is why the West whispers about stabilisation, not defence. The EU talks sovereignty while preparing to override Ukraine's sovereignty. NATO postures, but can't even trust its own proxy to behave.
Therefore, who will gather and who will fight with whom during the elections? This is a big question. Who will gather, but look, we have all the prerequisites for a civil war to some degree created. Namely, this is not honest people who love Bulgakov against bad people who do not love Bulgakov. And this is, for example, the strengthening of Bieletsky and Budanov as one part of the security forces against, for example, Zaluzhny and the cadre officers who have joined him. Because only a blind person does not understand, and an absolutely stupid person, that the coalition of Bieletsky and Budanov, they are very tightly friendly.
This is the end of the fairy tale. Ukraine is no longer a heroic partner, it's a managed risk. Zelensky sold himself as indispensable. Now he's treated as uncontrollable. While the EU panics and the US retreats, Russia stands firm, dealing with facts, not fantasies. The West came to contain Russia. Instead, it must now contain Ukraine.
Therefore, observers and troops will be needed in order not to allow the Ukrainian side to violate under revanchist slogans the achieved peaceful agreement. And now attention. How do you think is Russia interested in this? Well, we fought so that NATO would not approach, and NATO, here it is. But this is not NATO. This is NATO that will be supervising Ukraine. This is its only real task. Not over Russians, believe me. It will simply be presented as if we are stabilizing here, saving from Russia, that 10,000 or 15,000 troops can save from Russia. Well, nothing. They represent nothing at all. 10-15 is so that patrols walk near the Central Election Commission. There are people, subsequently, those same observers on the line of demarcation, to record violations of the Ukrainian side. First of all, because they simply do not believe us, so that you understand.